The following was recorded in front of a live studio audience at the Studio 21 Podcast Café. This is the United Podcast Network.
Welcome to the Writer's Block Podcast NH. This is a podcast designed by writers for writers on the journey to being published. Joined Mandra Viscornet.
It was so healthy and nutritious.
Deborah Monk.
Can we open each podcast with a dance number?
Shelley Devlin.
It was so full of inspiration and sparkles.
Every Tuesday morning live on YouTube. And make sure you subscribe to catch the podcast anytime on iTunes, iHeartRadio, Podbean, Spotify, or your favorite podcast catcher. It's time to be inspired, feel empowered, and be well with the Writer's Block Podcast NH.
And welcome to the Writer's Block Podcast. I'm Mandra.
I'm Debbie.
And we are missing Shelley today, but that's okay. Thank you for joining us at the Writer's Block, where our mission is to inspire, empower, and to help people be well. We're streaming live on Facebook this Tuesday morning from the Studio 21 Podcast Café, and we are excited to discuss a form of literature that we've yet to explore, poetry. Joining us to help us do just that is poet Deborah Schwartz. Welcome, Deborah.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here.
Well, we're happy you're here as well. Deborah is a Somerville, Massachusetts poet, fiction writer, and assistant professor in the English department at Bunker Hill Community College. A Girl Could Disappear Like This is her first full-length collection of poetry, and she is here with us to tell us all about that poetry and publishing poetry, and we got a lot to cover today, ladies.
Right, and most importantly, how to write poetry for those of us who are stuck on Roses Are Red.
Well, that's a good place to start. Some of us, I think it's just the form we naturally move towards. So in the same way that some of us are great storytellers, I'm not. So I don't tell stories. My wife and my friends and my brother-in-law, other people who are good storytellers do that. Some of us think in images, what does this look like? What does this feel like?
Right.
And in sounds. And poetry is like...
sounds.
Right. So poetry is like the oldest in some way literary form because it comes out of music and it comes out.
It has that lyrical.
It has that lyrical nature,
which is my favorite word for writing.
Okay, and even good storytellers use poetry. They use metaphor and they use images. But if you find yourself sort of secretly writing these poems, or if you're the person who, for weddings or bar mitzvahs or eulogies people go to, then you probably just have a affinity towards thinking about language as lyrical, as you've just said. And the ways to kind of nurture that, if you do want to start moving into writing formal poetry, is to undo our thoughts about it as being this high art that no one can access, because it's the basic art of playing with words. So
a what with words?
Playing.
Oh, playing with words.
Playful
God, yes.
art, like the way children make up rhymes while they're skipping rope or whatever. Down, down, baby, down by the roller coaster. All those clapping games.
Yep.
Those are poems, right? They start with rhythm. They start with an.
So they all count as poetry.
They all count as poetry. So one of the simplest ways to start really taking your poetry writing practice seriously is to just get a whole bunch of prompts, really simple prompts. And there's many, many books you can buy. There's Natalie Goldberg's Writing Down the Bones.
Ooh.
There's Matthew Zapruder's Exercises in Poetry. It's all out there. You can even Google it, prompts for writing poetry. But some of the ones that I like to use are a list of every scar on my body, for instance.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Every scar on my body. I could write that. I could write that.
Yes. Exactly. And then you get this. We love lists. Poems love lists. They love repetition. Here, 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 here. You could write something simply. I love writing. We talked about birds earlier. Every bird that you love. When you first loved birds, and then all of a sudden you're writing as if you are a bird. And that's the poetic stance. It's just playing with things. So if you gave yourself 10 prompts, this is what I do with students. You're going to write to a prompt every morning for 15 minutes. Just go. And don't worry about creating form, about it making sense. So like one of the poems that I'm going to read from later via your request is My Body Is. So you could start with this. Take 8 things in the room that have nothing to do with each other, and then describe how your body is that thing. It's playing. So you get all this generative work down, and then you start discerning what makes a poem. Because poem is about form.
Well, that's where, because when you say take 8 things in the room, I could do that. When you say the 8 every scar in my body, I think, okay, now let's write one together.
Yeah.
Like right now, the 3 of us.
Yeah.
How would we? Because that's
what poets do all the time secretly at the bar. They go,
I want to go to a poet bar.
Yeah,
Poets
you're
go to
in
the bar?
You're in it. Some of us live there. It's not a good place.
Which bar? What's the name of this bar?
The Poetry Bar.
Really?
No. But there should be. Maybe that's what we could. But so I was at this writing conference, and the very advanced, well-published poets over their whatever, beer or Manhattans or whatever, were playing this word game. Each person would say a word. And they'd go around the table, and there'd be this collaborative, organic sort of form that emerged. And poets love that.
Well, what I love about this whole thing is you just removed like so many obstacles.
Exactly. The pressure.
Yeah.
There's
and made it playful, like you said. Like, what a great word to just kind of mess around with some words and create poetry that way.
So if you said the and I said dog, that would be different than if you said the and I said eyeball. And the whole poem then is going to have the first decision to the second decision to the third decision. It's really carefully forming and watching how language moves, one word at a time. And poetry also is about space on the page, where you make line breaks.
Right.
Well, that's really interesting too, how
you place your words, because in your book, they're not just all left margin.
No.
No, they truly take a visual form.
Yeah, because the words seem alive to me while I'm playing with them. And some need to be by themselves. And some need, like they're people.
They need their buddies.
Each word is people. And there are even poets who deconstruct words. I've been reading this poet who has like butter on one line and butterfly. But it becomes something different if you break it as butter and fly.
Right.
Wow.
So
it becomes delicious.
And a little scary, right? Flying butterflies with butter on their, it just takes up. And then I've heard this other poet, I should be giving people their actual names, but I don't have the memory. She talked about, she's an academic, and she has a podcast too, and I think, anyways, she taught, and her first language is Spanish, her second language is English, and she talks about the beauty too of language is you start playing around. So maybe I use the word butterfly or eyeball. That's even better. Eyeball's great. And then the word I has an etymology. It has a history built into the word. Mm-hmm. Like it's, I think, it's either a Latinate word or it's a Gaelic word, and it unpacks. The word holds all the DNA of that history.
Right.
Too. So then you can even start looking eyeball, ball, and then you start playing off of that too. You kind of riff off of that.
So what if you're someone who doesn't have any trouble playing? Mm-hmm. I definitely don't have trouble playing.
I
can tell. But then it's the form. It's the how do you figure out how to put it together?
Yeah. That I don't have an easy answer for. But
damn it.
I can suggest like at least 3 things.
I'll take it.
Okay.
We love lists.
Mm-hmm. Right. One is I get a lot of students, they're like, oh, I want to write poetry. And I'm like, well, who are you reading? And they're not reading any poetry. So because
I just pointed at Deb only because
she hates that answer.
No, this is an answer that we always get.
Yes,
is that if you want to become a better writer, make sure you're reading.
Yeah,
and reading some good writing.
Right, and if reading in the form that you want to produce, because poetry, like I'm not speaking it now. it's not the language that we speak. It's not the discourse of everyday currency. So like you got to read it to internalize it, because we have internalized how to do subject, verb, direct, object, period, how to write, how to tell story. We've internalized it. We're around it. But unless we're around people reading it and people speaking it, and we read it ourselves and we hear it, you know, like my students are so versed at making music, singing music. It's because it's everywhere in popular culture.
Right.
Poetry's not so much in U.S. popular culture.
Well, think about when I was a kid and I skateboarded, all I wanted to do was skateboard and watch videos about skateboarding.
Exactly.
And then when I taught gymnastics, the kids would do their gymnastics and then go home and watch videos about gymnastics.
Exactly.
Right.
And this is how you get your brain to start developing in that culture and start thinking in terms of what it is you're
whatever
doing.
But what if
whatever
you read the
activity
poetry and you don't get it?
Find another author.
Yeah.
That's what brings me back
this
to the
is really
simplistic.
important. Well, the other thing about poetry is it's not taught right. Sorry. I include myself in that as a poetry teacher. It's taught as if it's this thing that only certain people can understand. The truth is
That's not accessible.
that it's not accessible. But the truth is, like, there's this poet named Matthew Zapruder, and he says on a podcast in the Poetry Foundation that when he first started listening to Lou Reed and the Velvet Underground, he was like, what the hell is this music about? He uses this analogy that it was like a garbage truck backing up over a bunch of glass, and it repelled him. But then he had a crush on this young woman or friend or something, and she was really into it. So by virtue of her being into it, he started listening to it again and again and again. And now Lou Reed and the Velvet Underground is one of his favorite groups. So sometimes when something feels non-accessible, like we can't grasp it, you know, a person might feel like that, or a movie, or skateboarding. Like you can't do it. And then it can also make you feel like, I'm going to conquer that. I'm going to keep going back into it and try and have a relationship with it. And the thing that you do, I think, is you ultimately see you can't decode it. It's not about making meaning. It's about feeling into it. It's about listening to the words, letting them wash over you, seeing what images make sense to you, letting go of the ones that don't. Does this resonate for me? Like, it's not about understanding every single line. It's about living in the experience that the poem is asking you to live in, sort of. So it's a different way of experiencing language, I think, than we're used to doing. And it does take some struggle sometimes.
Yeah. What else? Because you said maybe 3 things. So read poetry.
And then as you start, it really helped me when Natalie Goldberg in her book Writing Down the Bones said there's the generative writer who's going to write all this stuff. A lot of it's crap, you know, you just wrote what. And some of it are little diamonds in the rough. And you have to start learning how to pull out what's a diamond and what's, you know, not. And I think you do that the way you guys are talking about writing. You do that the way I've done it is in groups with other people. It's a social act. It's a social transaction.
Right.
Writing is not like we think of it as this isolated little thing. You go up into this tower and you write. First of all, most of us don't have that luxury. We're in the world, blah, blah, blah. We write between like picking up the kids and going shopping and whatever.
We're building a tower, by the way. I didn't even know that was an option. If I can have a tower, I will write more.
As long as we can smoke cigars.
Of course.
Okay.
You don't have to whisper that. We're in this podcast, the Cigar Authority studio here. We can do that.
But you guys,
so that's
what
kind of
you're
similar
doing
to what we're doing. And we say that all the time. Like, basically, you vomit on a page. And you find the diamonds and the small nuggets of truth.
And then you start sharing it with each other. Because if you're just doing it alone, and it's really scary to share your work. I'm still scared to share it in process. But you have to do that.
Yeah.
Like, you have to show each other the work, and you have to hear another reader say, you know, I love that first line, but that second line is so out there, I can't follow it at all. And then you sit with it, and you're like, oh, can I get away with that Or do I need to? So that's the second thing. You need other writers, other poets in particular, if you're wanting to write poetry, to read your work, give you feedback. And then there's a lot of adult ed classes around. And I know that's shelling out some money, but it's where someone who has a little more experience than you can guide you. I've done it. I've been participants in master classes or adult ed programs where with this other poet, I remember saying, I'm writing this thing. I don't even know if it's a poem anymore. And I sent it to him and he goes, that's the strongest work you've ever written because it comes.
Wow.
Right. So sometimes we don't know. And
Right.
we need
I
each
totally
other.
agree with that.
Yeah.
When you say you didn't know it was a poem, what does, like, how, that's a great, what makes something a poem versus not a poem?
Right.
One page? If it's on one page, it's a poem.
Well, I think it does. It has to have some kind of cadence to it.
Right.
Whether it's a natural cadence or one that
The rhythm.
It may only be able to be delivered by the author in some cases, but there is a cadence to poetry.
I try to put lyricalism into my writing, but that doesn't make it a poem.
Why don't we
Right.
have her read?
Okay, that's a
couple,
great idea.
because that, I think, would be...
before we have you read, have you noticed a resurgence of poetry in recent years?
I mean, I have
Me
because
too.
I'm around it. You have too.
Yes. Have you read Tanya Markle's The She Book?
Yeah.
Now,
yeah.
is that considered poetry?
Does she consider it poetry?
I don't know.
I don't know if she does. I think
what
might
would
be
you call that?
like a hybrid form between, like a cross maybe between personal reflection and some poetry.
And that's why it's easier for me to understand, maybe.
Yeah, or you're just not feeling confident enough, as you should, as a smart writing woman, that you can understand poetry, again, because it's been framed as this thing that's really high art and inaccessible.
Right.
It's how it's taught to us.
Well, and
I've written poems, so it can't be that difficult.
oh, good Lord.
And I've skateboarded, but really poorly.
You framed one of my poems. The
I
mermaid
know
poem.
I did. I know I did. You're an excellent writer.
I can hang.
You are very, very, very good.
You're too kind.
No, it's true.
I will reward you later.
Oh Lord. Going back to the She Book, she wrote, I think it's I'm not sure, 99, 1, 2, 3, and I think by I realized later on, I think they're referring to ages, so it isn't pages, even though it's pages, like page 1, page 2, page 3. But I think she's sort of referring to, and to me, that's where it gets a little bit of the poetry interpretation of, did you catch that?
Right.
And did she even mean that? Which I think she did. Because I can't imagine I made that up, but it seems like they're referring to the ages.
So the way you're reading that is as a poet reads. So for instance, one of the poems that I will read, but not yet, I didn't know how to frame them or how to order them. So I started writing a bunch of day 1, day 2, day 3, and I thought in my head, if I created a time frame, then the poem would have a context, it would sit. So
which is sort of even what we do with our books, where and we say to each other and to Shelley, and okay, where are you trying to go with this story? Because if you don't know where you're trying to go, you're not going to know how to get there. Yeah. So you're not going to know when you're lost.
Yeah.
So
and sometimes you create like these seemingly arbitrary, or artificial, maybe even frames, either their titles or their how you're thinking of a sequence, and then you see if it works, and then you throw it out if it doesn't. Like one poet who's originally looking at my collection was like, I had everything ordered day 1, day 2, day. She's like, mix up the order because the consciousness of this narrator is like non-linear. So she goes into memory and back. So that was like, oh, okay. So ordering it worked as a draft, but to edit it,
you needed to mix it up.
Wow.
And go back and forth in time.
Yeah.
All right. So which one are you going to read first?
So why don't I start with one of the day poems? It's day 3, and
that's one of my favorite.
Oh, good. It's an older poem, and it's in a section of love poems, and that's the other great thing about poetry. You could just write that could be a prompt. Write a love poem to someone you hate. Write a hate poem to someone you love. You can poetry gives you so much freedom, so I took the freedom and wrote a bunch of love poems. Okay. Day 3. If we didn't wear clothes, not only would we be cold and naked, but our hearts would fly out of our bodies. I wear pink and red and orange all at once. I match the horizon and clash with myself until she stops at the bus stop in front of my house. I shed my clothes, no longer just me, horizon, and sun. I do what she wants. If I had a car, I would drive away. Since I don't have a car, I use the same vehicle that we all use, one another.
That last bit was my favorite.
It is? Why is that?
Why? We use one another to drive away from each other.
Yeah.
Like, that is just so intricate relationship-wise.
And that's what these poems seem to be concerned with. And I didn't know it going in. They seem to be concerned with, like, the difficulties of having a relationship and intimacy and how you go towards and away at the same time.
And all of that actually in just these last 2 stanzas.
Right.
You know, in just so many few words, a huge
It's such a great example
concept.
of showing, not telling.
Exactly.
It really
that
is
too.
showing, not telling on steroids.
Yes.
Because so few words,
Right.
For a,
so compact, but it's
for a complicated idea.
and it allows the person who's reading it or listening to it to be able to filter that through their own personal bullshit. So
Right.
one person could get one
Right.
thing out of it,
Right.
and someone else could be taken in a completely different direction.
Yeah, that's the idea. If someone said, write a poem about intimacy where you both are attracted to each other, need each other, and are totally freaked out by each other and need distance and don't know and blah, blah, I could not write this poem. But somehow I got invested in the idea of being naked. Like, what does it mean to be naked? You know, everyone says it's a metaphor, being naked. But what about when you really are naked? That moment, you know, with your lover when you're naked and how you're seeing each other. And then I was like, wow, let's get away from each other. This is a little too intimate. Oh, how do I get away from each other? My car. And then, you know what I mean?
Right.
So I didn't say I'm going to write a poem about intimacy. I was more interested in the original metaphor of, like, being naked.
So when you just said that you wrote about intimacy, what came to me was the visual I had. If you said to me, write a poem about intimacy right now, I would write it from an octopus's point of view.
Oh my God.
And I don't know why, but that was the vision I had. But then
So would you have all these underwater arms?
Yeah, all the tentacles, and there would be the suction cups.
That's
and
fantastic.
I don't know if I am the octopus or if I'm being, or
Maybe you're both.
Yeah, I don't know. Or are they the people I'm
Right.
trying to be intimate with? Octopus. I think that's it.
Well,
and then
the
I could.
great thing about poetry is you could weave both of those concepts.
Well,
in
I
there.
could. Yeah. The thing that I would do is I would stick with the octopus analogy. The thing that you did here is you're talking about being naked. I love the hearts would fly out of our bodies. And then the red and orange, and which pink, red and orange, a lot of women theoretically, fashion-wise, say those colors don't go together, which I love that you put them together and you say you match the horizon.
Yes, that
you
was one of my
clash with
favorite
yourself.
parts.
But then you say until she stops at the bus stop in front of my house, and I'm thinking, okay, wait, I'm lost now. I'm envisioning this kind of primal dancing woman dancing naked with the horizon and her pink and her red. And wait, there's a bus stop? Where'd the bus stop come from? And that's where I get lost. And
But
that's
somebody standing at a bus stop going to the most boring job might be envisioning that they're dancing in the sunset wearing this crazy costume or outfit. So you just kind of, it's
And then
like
it brings you back
Well,
to kind of
let's
the
ask the
humdrum
writer.
of
a
life.
telephoto lens. You know, it's a lens that can see the whole picture and then dive right into one spot and then
I love
pull
that.
back.
yeah, is that what you meant? Let's ask the writer.
And we
Since we
have
have her
her.
here. Writer, what did you mean?
I think I meant what I said, which is
Well, that would be something. wouldn't it?
which is like, here's all this like theoretical, now I remember that first stanza. If we didn't wear clothes, we'd be cold and naked in our hearts. I was really meditating on I was writing in a friend's house while she was at work. I had the luxury to do that. She had this awesome picture of Jesus in the Purple Heart. And I was like, wow, what if your heart was outside of your body? What if like your love was so big that it would fly out all over the places? So I started with that. And then I'm like, I'm kind of bored. Like in part because I have like a Gemini. I'm a Gemini, my son. So it gets bored staying in one place. It's real. I like association. So there's this person all alone kind of conjuring about like theoretical, philosophical ideas about love in the body. How does it work? Intimacy. I love myself. I'm wearing, like you said, I'm wearing all these colors. I don't care. I don't care what other people think, etc. And then she stops in front of my house and the whole world is disrupted. My whole sense of self is disrupted. And all these clothes that I'm wearing and thinking about being naked, okay, I'll do it. She asked me to do it, I'll do it. Like it's kind of that simple.
Huh.
But I love what...
I know, I love what he said sounded good.
Right. And I think that is the beauty of poetry. Like, Jonathan, what you brought to that poem is as meaningful as what I bring to the poem as the writer, because it's meant to be read.
Right.
And it's read through our own filters.
And I think that is what you need to hear, Deb, is it's okay if you read some poems and you have kind of take away a different meaning than if I read the same.
Right. Which I totally get that. I sometimes...
And sometimes you might not know really what was meant.
And I want to say one more thing. So here you are, you're going to write that octopus poem. I know it. And then like all of a sudden you're going to surprise yourself. Like you're writing about the suction cups and I'm the octopus. And then all of a sudden something's going to happen where you're like, I don't want to be the octopus in it. Like I'm done. I'm like the fish that goes by, or I'm the prey that the octopus captures, or I'm the bait. Like you're going to...
Sometimes your initial idea gets you to where you're going and you don't need it anymore. It's the
that
gangway
too.
to get onto the ship. It just drops off into the water and now we're on the ship and we're sailing.
Because the only reason why people write poetry, I think, well, this is pretty... I can't say this platitude. One of the big reasons why I write poetry is to keep myself surprised, right?
Yeah.
Like, and the words will kind of lead me to the next idea. And I know this.
So she's a pantster poet.
I guess so.
Pantster poet.
I heard your podcast about that. I do know poets, and a very, very famous James Tate once said he just writes the whole thing knowing exactly where he's going, and he left us. He passed a couple of years ago, but he was mastered. He mastered the craft, and he mastered his mind enough where he just knew where he's going.
Right.
And he didn't draft. But me, I'm like constantly working it and trying to surprise myself.
Where can people find this, Deborah?
Okay. So it's a small press in Somerville that published it called Catty Wampus. Okay. KATTYWOMPUS. And the editor, Sammy Greenspan, has a website, cattywwampuspress.com. And you can order it there. You can also Google me, Deborah Schwartz, poet, or Deborah Cecile Schwartz, and I have a website, and we'll lead you there.
Is that your name, the website?
Yeah,
to find you?
Deborah Cecile Schwartz. DeborahCecile Schwartz, SCHWARTZ.com.
All right. Well, we don't have much time left, but thank you so
This
much
was
for
wonderful.
coming. See
Thank
how
you
fast
for
it
playing
goes,
with
right?
me. Oh my God, let's do another.
I know.
I want to hear about your writing. I want to come back and hear the octopus.
I know. We'll have octopus for next week. Thank you so much for coming on,
thanks for
Deborah.
having me. Keep on writing.
Thank you all for listening and to the Studio 21 Podcast Cafe. If you'd like to hear this episode again or share it with a friend, you can head on over to the UnitedPodcastNetwork.tv. That's UnitedPodcastNetwork.tv. And you can also check out the Writer's Block NH Facebook and the Writer's Block podcast on your favorite podcast catcher. May you be inspired, feel empowered, and be well.
The views and opinions expressed by the hosts, guests, or callers of this program do not necessarily reflect the opinions of the Studio 21 Podcast Café, the United Podcast Network, its partners, or affiliates.